This virtual 2021 candidate forum for Ward 3, Jackson City Council, is being conducted by the League of Women Voters, Jackson area. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support any candidate or political party. The League of Women Voters encourages informed and active participation by citizens in all local, state, and national elections. One of the League's most important roles is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls, and thus we bring you this 2021 Ward 3 Jackson City Council Candidate Forum. Jackson residents can contact the city clerk to register to vote, to verify their voter registration status, and to obtain an absentee ballot application. The in-person election will be on Tuesday, November 2nd. Absentee ballots will be mailed starting late September for those who request them. As COVID precautions are still a concern, we decided to continue our 2021 candidate forums in the Zoom format. To avoid any issues with connectivity, we're conducting this candidate forum in the Lean Rocket Lab in Jackson on Thursday, September 30th. This forum will be unedited and posted on our League website, also the vote411.org site, and on YouTube. No part of this recorded candidate forum may be used without the express written approval of the League of Women Voters, Jackson area. No part of this candidate forum can be used by the candidates or their staff for any purpose other than to direct their potential constituents to the aforementioned sites for viewing. It is my pleasure to present our moderator for the candidate forum, Mrs. Gwen Tabb.
My name is Gwen Tabb, and I will be the moderator for this candidate forum. It is my honor to introduce and thank the candidates participating in the 2021 Ward 3 City Council race, Mr. Caleb Blondke and Ms. Angelita Gunn. Let me review the basics of the format. Each of you will have 90 seconds to make your opening and closing statements. Candidates are asked to speak only of themselves and their ideas with no disparaging remarks about opponents or others. Time will be kept by a member of the League. Every candidate will have 1 minute to answer each question. You will be alerted at 15 seconds remaining and when your 1 minute is ended. You will be allowed to end your sentence and are expected to stop at that point. As the moderator, I will interrupt a candidate who exceeds the time limit. The order of the open and closed statements will be alternated, as will who receives questions first. The questions that I will ask you have been obtained from members of the community prior to this candidate forum. Candidates are asked to manage muting and unmuting themselves throughout the forum. Questions for the League of Women Voter Candidate Forums are not provided to candidates ahead of time. The League of Women Voters Jackson area decided to provide question number 1 to candidates a few moments prior to the start of the forum, allowing candidates time to consider their introduction to Jackson voters. No other questions were provided to candidates before the start of the forum. The order of the opening and closing statements, as well as the questions, will be alternated. I will repeat questions if you need me to do so. Mr. Blondke, you have up to 90 seconds to make your opening statement.
Hello, my name is Caleb Blondke. I am a neighbor of yours here in the 3rd Ward. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring me and Angelita here at this Lean Rocket Lab. And I know we live in a different time period with this Zoom thing, so please deal with me here. So I am a story kind of guy. To get to know a little bit about myself, I enjoy a good story. And one story I enjoy is that in the early 1900s, Texas farmers were getting foreclosed on left and right. There was nothing left to do. So one of the farmers had nothing left. He was about to get foreclosed on in the bank. And an oil company in the early 1900s made this farmer an offer. They said, "Sir, keep your land. All we want are the mineral rights to your farm." And the guy said, "Really? I get to keep my house and all you want is mineral rights?" They said, "Yes, sir." He said, "All right." And they said, "We will pay the bank, but all we ask is for the mineral rights to your land." The farmer was like, "Well, I've got nothing left to lose." And so he agreed with the mineral rights to the oil company. And sure enough, they found oil on his land. I think Jackson is in that similar situation. We are in desperate straits. Crime is going up. Poverty is going up. But yet at the same time, we sit on an oil of opportunity. That oil is housing. We have so much housing that is available. We have stories to tell as neighbors. We have businesses, small businesses. There is the traffic flow in Jackson compared to Lansing, Toledo, any other municipality is wonderful. We need, as a city council, to promote the city of Jackson. If we don't believe in our city, who else will? I ask you to give me your support this November. Thank you.
Ms. Gunn, you have up to 90 seconds to make your opening statement.
Good afternoon. My name is Angelita Gunn. I am currently the Executive Director of Aware Incorporated. We're a multi-service organization that provides crisis support to victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. I was born and raised here in Jackson, Michigan. I was a graduate of Jackson High School. I'm an alumni of Michigan State University. When I was 18 years old, I left Jackson and I moved to the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, where I studied at the University of Minnesota. I was gone for 18 years, and in 1999, I moved back to Jackson, Michigan. This is where my family is. I have siblings. I have a very large, extensive, close-knit family of aunts and uncles and cousins. And so I moved back in 1999 to be back and close to my family. I was married for 10 years to a high school sweetheart. And he was also from Jackson, Michigan. And once my ex-husband and I decided to part ways amicably, I bought a house on the east side. I have spent a significant amount of time with the Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence, where my experience there included public policy work, particularly on violence against women issues. And my goals would be to support the work of the City Council and be diligent in doing research on all the issues that pertain to our citizens.
Ms. Gunn, as a way to further introduce yourself to the citizens of Ward 3, we have a multi-part question. Please share how long you have lived in Jackson, what kind of work and or volunteer experiences you have had that may have prepared you for the Ward 3 City Council position, and what actions have you taken to contribute to the improvement of the Jackson community?
Okay, thank you. So I have been back as a resident. Again, I was born and raised in Jackson, Michigan, but I've been back since 1999. And again, what brought me back to Jackson was my family, my close-knit family. And I'm now living and working here in Jackson. I'm working at Aware Incorporated, and I've been the executive director there for 6 years. Prior to joining the coalition, I was the associate director for the Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. And my experience there has what I believe prepared me for policy work and sitting on the city council and looking at ways to better the city through participation at the grassroots level. I work with families at Aware that are indigent, that are oftentimes starting their lives over again. And I think that the issues for the people that I serve are similar issues that we face in our community.
Mr. Blondke, as a way to further introduce yourself to the citizens of Ward 3, we have a multi-part question. Please share how long you have lived in Jackson, what kind of work and or volunteer experiences you had that may have prepared you for the Ward 3 City Council position. What actions have you taken to contribute to the improvement of the Jackson community?
Yes, I've lived in the city of Jackson for the past 12 years. Fell in love with the city when my wife and I moved here with our sons in 2009. And we of course, well, I shouldn't say of course, we purchased our home through Jackson Affordable Housing. They paid the down payment and was really handy at the time. We bought when the market had crashed for the houses in 2009. And our house is probably twice the value of what we paid for it back in 2009. As far as work experience here in Jackson, I was a substitute teacher for the Jackson Public Schools. I am aware of the crisis going on in our public schools with class sizes being way too much, teachers being overworked, and the fact is they need help. Granted that nurses in the hospitals are at an even bigger crisis. I think the crisis that sometimes is not talked about is our public school education. And I believe as a member of City Council, I have some inroads into that and look forward to serving in that way.
Mr. Blondke, what do you believe the overall responsibilities of the Jackson City Council members to be?
First of all, we need to make sure that the citizens are safe. I believe as City Council, that budget should include law enforcement, firefighters, and make sure that we are getting the best service possible and getting, as they say, the most bang for our buck. Secondly, after safety should come business. What are we doing to expand business? What are we doing to expand real estate? What are we doing to attract people to the city of Jackson? And that would be my second priority. After safety would be business. I think those two are the main issues, and I will leave it at that.
Ms. Gunn, what do you believe the overall responsibilities of the Jackson Council members to be?
I believe that the City Council is there to serve its citizens and to create opportunities for people to be able to thrive in their communities, to help improve the quality of life for its citizens, and creating opportunities such as jobs or helping with the infrastructure that would help people get to jobs, for example, public transportation. I also believe that housing is a significant issue for Jackson residents. We have a very low number of new builds, especially looking at homes in communities and in neighborhoods. The city has done a wonderful job of trying to attract businesses to the downtown area and building up housing in the downtown area. And I think it's time to move those activities out into neighborhoods and communities.
Ms. Gunn, what would you do as a Jackson City Council member to make Jackson a better place to live, work, and play?
Again, I think the City Council has started, has a great start here in the downtown area. So some of the same ideas for road, for example, resurfacing the roads and repairing or replacing the pipes, the water infrastructure. So all of the infrastructure that they've done here in the downtown area, I would ask that, or I would help support those efforts going out into our communities. and especially in Ward 3. I also agree that crime appears to be rising. It may not be true in all the neighborhoods. I think that there are some neighborhoods that have lived with crime for a lot longer than the rest of us. But I do feel like public safety is an issue of great importance. And I would support efforts to help people feel safer in their communities. I also feel like there's some people feel a bit disconnected. Some communities feel disconnected from their city council members and government. And that I would encourage more collaboration in communities through block parties and ward meetings.
Mr. Blondke, what would you do as a Jackson City Council member to make Jackson a better place to live, work, and play?
All right, I appreciate the question. Definitely, Jackson needs someone who relates with people. We need to have someone that is working with neighborhood, I would say neighborhood meetings, getting more neighborhood watch meetings. One thing I would like to see is definitely more representation from citizens besides just 7 people on the council. There definitely needs to be more input. I would actually personally be in favor of block captains, people that would communicate with their individual council member and let them know what they think about certain issues. For instance, the single hauler system might be coming up in our term. I would like to hear from citizens in that area. We also need to make sure that as a city council that we are directly communicating with our ward members. And I believe that that can be accomplished through ward meetings, as Angelita mentioned, and Third Ward sadly has not had a lot of those in the last 4 years.
Ms. Gunn, please explain in detail what you feel the #1 priority that residents in Ward 3 hope that you will accomplish. How will you implement this?
That's a really good question. In detail. Well, I know when I was meeting my neighbors, as I was getting petition signatures, people were conveying information across the board. So things, very simple things like safety, of course, being one of those issues. So I had a older gentleman say, this light has been out on my street for a really long time, and I called the city and nothing happens. So I think there are some very practical kind of simple things that can happen in communities to help people in their neighborhoods feel safe. I do know that in our neighborhoods, we are also hearing gun violence. And so I think that that makes people afraid of being out at night and afraid of knowing who their neighbors are. And so I think that some very simple things like that would help people feel safer in their communities.
Ms. Gunn, as a follow-up, please explain in detail what you feel the #2 priority that residents in Ward 3 hope that you will accomplish. How will you implement this?
So I think a large issue for lots of our neighborhoods, not just Ward 3, are the roads. And this is an infrastructure issue that has been going on for a very long time. And I think there have been serious consequences to potholes in our neighborhoods and not being able to drive our cars. There have been consequences to maintenance upkeep of vehicles. So I think that's a universal issue across the city, and particularly in Ward 3. And so I would see that as one of the top 3 priorities for the city council. And I know that there are plans in place to implement those activities, and I would support that and look at creative ways to provide the funding for those roads as well.
Mr. Blondke, as a follow-up, please explain in detail what you feel the number 2 priority that residents in Ward 3 hope that you will accomplish. How would you implement this?
All right, so I think I mentioned number 2 as business. Obviously, we need to make sure that we're getting business downtown. And I'm not talking about big chain restaurants. I want to see the small business owners, the mom and pop businesses come in and come back in the city. Definitely, my heart is manufacturing. I have worked in the manufacturing industry for the last 20 years. And I want to make sure that we are getting the manufacturing companies to consider coming back in city limits and working in Jackson. We have the growing trend right now is that a lot of millennials don't even have driver's license and therefore have a problem getting transportation to work. I would encourage and try my best to sell manufacturing industries to please come to the city. We can get you workers if you are willing to take the risk. We will try to get you workers from our big city base of young men, young women willing to work. They just don't have cars, driver's license to drive. Please consider coming to downtown.
Mr. Blondke, do you think any changes need to be made to the city budget? If you do, what are the changes and why?
So we are aware that Joe Biden has passed a $38 million grant to the city through the latest infrastructure bill. I want to make sure that we are using the best possible way of using those funds. A lot of them are being spent currently. And of course, we want to make sure that they are used toward the best possible way. Sometimes they can only be allocated to storefronts, or they can only be allocated to roads, or only allocated toward water. Let's make sure that that's getting done. One idea that I did put, and I would like to see happen, is what happened to me in 2009. I would like to see some of the infrastructure being used for first-time home buyers in city limits. That definitely needs to be a possibility. Perhaps we can look into it. And I'd like to see more young families move downtown and take advantage of getting a closing of their closing costs when they go to buy a house.
Ms. Gunn, do you think any changes need to be made to the city budget? If you do, what are the changes and why?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what Mr. Blondke laid forth as far as the priorities that are in the current plans for the money that's coming in from the federal government. I also think that housing, diversified housing. So we have the housing structures that were built downtown, and it's great, and it's great to have housing downtown because of the flexibility for and the ease for transportation to get out into other parts of the city. However, I think diversifying in single family homes, for example, or homes with backyards where kids could play, and homes in neighborhoods. And I think in addition to looking at, we have new homes, we also have a lot of homes that are old and aging. I live in a home that was built in the 1920s. And so setting up supports for people who are homeowners or are even renters who have the opportunity to support fixing up those homes so that they can continue to be used.
Ms. Gunn, what role do you believe the city of Jackson should have in ensuring that citizens who are in need have access to housing, a basic and urgent need, especially for the homeless?
Yeah, well, social service agencies play a significant role in providing crisis services, especially for the indigent, including housing. I think that the city council can support some of the current agencies that are providing those services. I know in the past that CDBG funding has been used to support Aware Shelter, for example. And so I think that they definitely have a role to play. I think that the expertise for the solving the homelessness crisis, or coming up with ideas for other needs around homelessness, could really be a part of the social services network. And the continuum of care, for example, is a body of people who are working with the most indigent and people who are currently homeless. And I think that we could learn a lot from engaging and collaborating with bodies that already exist in social service agencies, and be a part of that.
Mr. Blondke, what role do you believe the city of Jackson should have in ensuring that citizens who are in need have access to housing, a basic and urgent need, especially for the homeless?
Okay, so we understand that as homeowners, we don't own a home, the home owns us. All right. We understand that homelessness cannot be solved by simply putting a roof over the homeless. There has to be education, there has to be training. There is so much with home ownership, it's almost like needing another college degree to figure out how to even buy a mortgage or how to understand a lease agreement. We need to make sure that, first of all, education is going on for the homeless. There needs to be a way that we can fast track this, because simply putting a roof over their heads does not work. There's mental health issues that is probably going on. There are probably family abandonment. It's possible there could be, there's so many extenuating circumstances that not each individual has, we need to hear their stories. I would want to hear each story of the homeless person. They're probably wide and far ranging. And when we meet that need first, then I would like to address the home issue.
Mr. Blondke, if there are American Rescue Plan funds available, would you support developing a plan to aid low-income residents having access to a reasonable amount of money to make improvements to their home?
I would, under certain conditions. First of all, they would have to be willing to make a commitment to the city for 5 years. If they simply take the money and make improvements to their home and then move out, I don't think that helps the city. There should be definitely a loan for the first 5 years. If they live within city limits in that home for 5 years, then yes, I would be in favor of this program. Another thing I would like to see is make sure that, first of all, they have employment or a means to support themselves. This is very important because if we just throw money toward a certain project and don't see a return on dividends, that's a problem for the city, and we don't want to get down that road. So I would like to see this program enacted with certain boundaries and certain stipulations.
Ms. Gunn, if there are American Rescue Plan funds available, would you support developing a plan to aid low-income residents having access to a reasonable amount of money to make improvements to their homes?
I think that's a good use of funds. I think that that type of support is needed and necessary. I think what I've seen in the last 6 years at my work at AWARE and participating on the continuum of care are foreclosures to houses that were in dire need of repair, people being displaced as a result, both renters and homeowners. And I think that would be a great use of funds to help housing stability. It also helped with diversifying funding if we're looking at homes and not necessarily apartment buildings. So I think it would be a great use of funds. And I think that there are organizations, for example, like Habitat for Humanity, who has a roster of people that they work with, general contractors, roofers, that could help collaborate to make that a successful project.
Ms. Gunn, the United Way is interested in purchasing the New Tribes building. hoping to develop a housing anchored approach to break the cycle of homelessness in Jackson. Please explain your support or opposition to this effort.
Yeah, that's a very big building. I would say I'm not in opposition to it. I think what my experience, again, because I've been sitting on the continuum of care, and we've had ongoing dialogue with United Way about the use of that building. We explored even the possibility of having Aware be a part of that process. And of course, because of confidentiality and safety, it didn't make a lot of sense for us to move our facilities into a building of that sort. I think that what I would encourage is thoughtful collaboration with the continuum of care and the current social service agencies that are providing homelessness services, mental health services, substance use disorder services, and that a very thoughtful process in collaborating with partners in the community that are already doing good work. I think it could we could find a solution for that building and a good use for that building.
Mr. Blondke, the United Way is interested in purchasing the New Tribes building, hoping to develop a housing anchored approach to break the cycle of homelessness in Jackson. Please explain your support or opposition to this effort.
All right, I don't really support or oppose this position as well. Basically, I would have to have more information than what I'm hearing now. For instance, I would need to see a long-term range plan of how this would be eventually become a profit to the city. I don't believe the city should be holding real estate. We need to first make this available to private buyers, private businesses. I know Allegiance is right there, and maybe they might be interested in the building as well. I know they have expressed interest, and I would like to hear from them as well. I know, especially with the COVID pandemic, I'm sure Allegiance would love to at least look at the business terms for this. I would be in favor of United Way purchasing it as long as I could see, again, a return on investment. There has to be a long-term plan, and I have yet to see that from United Way. So I don't believe the city should hang on to this property. I believe we need to sell it. We need to sell it quick because, as we know, buildings always tend to depreciate and they tend to go to ruin if not kept up. So the sooner we sell this, the better.
Mr. Blondke, some American Rescue Plan funds are federally directed to be used for infrastructure improvements related to climate change. What ideas do you have regarding climate change concerns in Jackson and possible implementation of infrastructure changes in Jackson?
So one area that either me or Angelita are going to have to address in the upcoming years is definitely the replacement of lead pipes. There is nothing more important to me and my family, my children, my neighbor Angelita, anybody else on Third Ward than having clean drinking water. I want this infrastructure to, as much as possible, to go to replacing lead pipelines. I have looked at pictures of our current water plant, and it is not looking good. This drastically needs to be updated, and I believe that the majority of the infrastructure funds that we receive really need to be addressing the lead pipelines. I believe this is an environmental factor, and if we don't get ahead of this, we are going to end up having to pay more. We know that inflation is coming right around the corner, and it's just a necessary fact of life that cost of things are going to go up. That includes our water bill, that includes the upkeep of water, and definitely, if we've got the funds, we need to definitely be looking at prioritizing replacing these lead pipelines.
Ms. Gunn, some American Rescue Plan funds are federally directed to be used for infrastructure improvements related to climate change. What ideas do you have regarding climate change concerns in Jackson and possible implementation of infrastructure changes in Jackson?
So I would agree with Mr. Blondke that the lead pipes are one of the #1 priorities. I think that that's in part what has contributed to the roads, the delay in the roads, is knowing that there are pipes underneath there. I also think that looking at ways to help clean up the city, I think that there are some efforts taking place where private citizens are taking it upon themselves to do cleanup in their own neighborhoods. So I think some type of infrastructure and support for helping people with sewage and disposal, especially disposal of things that are not landfill. I think that those are also areas that the city could help build up infrastructure for waste management.
Ms. Gunn, law enforcement officers often have to deal with emergency calls involving citizens' anger, domestic violence, and mental health issues. There are calls to have mental health professionals on response teams. Do you support this strategy of de-escalation of emergency situations? Please give reasons for your response.
Yeah, I agree. Law enforcement officers have one of the hardest jobs that I know of. I have a lot of law enforcement in my family and have heard a lot of stories. But I want to look at that issue a little more. I do know that some type of trauma-informed, some type of support to help with de-escalation and getting people help instead of immediately making an arrest, for example. I think that we have to balance that with safety. So you mentioned domestic violence, and that's my background and expertise. And so I know, for example, that there are times when an arrest is necessary because it's a dangerous situation. And so having a mental health provider accompany a law enforcement officer may or may not address the safety issues that are paramount when it comes to domestic violence.
Mr. Blondke, law enforcement officers often have to deal with emergency calls involving citizens' anger, domestic violence, and mental health issues. There are calls to have mental health professionals on response teams. Do you support the strategy of de-escalation of emergency situations? Please give reasons for your response.
First of all, we understand that there is probably no harder job than a police officer. Angelita mentioned it. I know I personally couldn't even begin to imagine what they go through on a daily basis. As far as one way we can work with is that I believe that local police officers need to have more access to citizens in our third ward. We should know the name of our local police officer that patrols our neighborhood. I believe that would be a simple step to help. Also, if the local police are aware of those who maybe have autism and maybe don't like to be touched, I know that's an issue, and I think local law enforcement should be aware of who might have special needs. As far as having someone escort the police officers, I think as long as the police officers are doing body cams, I'm happy with that. I like to see that more. That way we have not just one side, we have what the camera's seeing. And at the same time, I'd like to see the safety, if there were to be social workers, that make sure that they are, first of all, in a safe position and able to let the police first perform their duties.
Mr. Blondke, there are many areas of Jackson that are considered food deserts because of limited grocery stores in Jackson. What do you believe could be done to encourage more grocery stores to open within the Jackson city limits? And how can you help in this effort?
So we have a problem in our city of childhood obesity. And I believe a big problem is the fact that there aren't a lot of local grocery stores that people can visit. I know talking to the first ward candidates that they are trying to get a local grocery store in there. I want to make it as good as possible, or on my part, to make sure that this happens, that a local business owner is able to make it profitable, and that this could happen within our term, either me or Angelita's term, that we could say that we have local grocery stores. In order to do so, we would also need to think about maybe expanding bus hours. I know that's going to cost the city a little bit more money, but not everybody works. Maybe some people need to get out after 5 o'clock, or 9 o'clock to get their groceries. And I think that should be something that could be looked at as well. A lot of people don't have driver's license that can go out and get food, or they're elderly and just not comfortable driving. And let's make sure that we make city services available with the busing industry as well.
Ms. Gunn, there are many areas of Jackson that are considered food deserts because of limited grocery stores in Jackson. What do you believe could be done to encourage more grocery stores to open within Jackson city limits? And how can you help in this effort?
Yeah, I agree. Food deserts in the inner city, especially, that there are not a lot of alternatives for families, especially who don't have vehicles and are walking, or again, as Mr. Blondke mentioned, working hours, and transportation is limited. Our current bus service is limited. I would want to explore that issue more. I'm not sure how we would attract, but I would like to talk to grocery store owners. We have a lot of we have Polly's, for example, and I know the families that own those grocery stores, and explore ideas on how we could attract grocery stores in neighborhoods. I also really like the idea of community gardens. I know that there's been a very successful and prosperous one at MLK, started up by a young entrepreneur here. And I really like the idea of community gardens and exploring other alternatives to food and growing food for people in the inner city.
Ms. Gunn, limited public transportation continues to be a problem for city residents, especially as it relates to residents getting to jobs and access to daycare. Do you have ideas that could improve reliable transportation, which would help residents get to jobs?
Yeah, yes, I agree. I think we need to look at setting up infrastructure for our current public transportation to extend its hours, ending at 6 o'clock, when there are a lot of people who work a 9 to 5, and it doesn't really give people much time to use that service, and then limited weekend hours as well. And even cabs and Lyfts and Ubers are very, very limited to non-existent now here in Jackson County. So I know that there are other smaller shuttle services that are available too. I think people don't know about them. So I think that would help in some ways, is to make sure that people are aware of all of the types of services that are available for public transportation. And thinking about people getting to jobs, encouraging ride shares, for example, or encouraging local industries, for example, to provide shuttle service to employees, and figuring out how to support that as part of their as part of what they offer to their employees.
Mr. Blondke, limited public transportation continues to be a problem for city residents, especially as it relates to residents getting to jobs and access to daycare. Do you have ideas that could improve reliable transportation, which could help residents get to jobs?
Again, I come from a manufacturing experience, and I know for me personally, there was a few people that were talking that they wanted to get a job, but they didn't have a way to get to the job. I would encourage small business manufacturing, take a risk here in the city. Come to our city. We have people, I believe, that have not been tapped for your workforce that would love to work for you, but just simply need a ride. This, again, I want to be the biggest cheerleader for manufacturing as well as just any small business in general. Take a chance with us. Be willing to help with employees who need rides. Bring your business downtown. And if at all in the city level, if we can use that infrastructure bill, if there's any part of it that can be used to expand bus hours, expand or subsidize some ride shares or Uber, I would definitely be voting in favor of that. Again, we take a chance, and I hope to get more small businesses to come in the next 4 years.
This concludes our questions. Ms. Gunn, you may now take up to 90 seconds for your closing statement.
Thank you again for inviting me tonight to participate in this forum. I appreciate the efforts of the League of Women Voters to get information out there to voters. I am not a traditional candidate by any means. I'm an activist, and that's my work. And I have spent the past 38 years working for crime victims. That's victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And in some cases, they're the most indigent. In some cases, by the time they come to us, they're at their most desperate. And we help people rebuild their lives. So we help them secure housing. We help them secure resources. We help them with transportation. We help them see the strength in themselves. And I think that our goals, and my goal as an activist and as an advocate for crime victims, particularly domestic violence and sexual assault, are helping support self-determination for individuals. And I think that that is a universal issue. And I think what I would bring to the City Council is that passion and working with the community and collaborating with the community to come up with solutions. I want to hear from people who are on the ground and hear what their needs are and bring their voices to the City Council. And that's why I'm here.
Mr. Blondke, you may now take up to 90 seconds for your closing statement.
All right, I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity for me and Angelita, and just to get our face out in the public, especially with the COVID pandemic than what we've had. This probably isn't ideal for me and her with the Zoom. I know we respond to people's faces, their emotions, how to read people's faces, and for that I want to be sensitive to that. However, as a third ward councilman, I would like to say that I would like to be available to just have a cup of coffee with you. You know, get to know you. What's your story? What are your ideas for Jackson that I haven't heard about, and maybe City Council hasn't heard about? I would just like to close again with a story, because I like stories, and I want to hear your story. But one story I was reading about, there was a boy. It was after a big storm had happened on the beach, and there was a bunch of starfish all over the beach. The little boy started slowly picking up one starfish one by one, even though there were thousands on the beach, and throwing them back in the ocean. An old man came along and he said, "Young man, that's a waste of time." He's like, "There's no way you could possibly save all those starfish." The little boy thought for a minute, and he picked up another starfish and threw it back in the ocean. He says, "That I did for that one." And I think that's what we're going to be happening in City Council. We are not going to be solving the problems in the next 4 years. These problems took years to develop, and whether it's Angelita or I that is in the City Council, please don't expect miracles. But I would like to say that as a City Council member, I was able to at least throw a few starfish back in the ocean. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blondke and Ms. Gunn, for participating in the 2021 Candidate Forum for the Ward 3 Council Member race.
The League wishes to thank Mr. Caleb Blondke and Ms. Angelita Gunn for accepting our invitation to participate in this candidate forum. Each of you have provided important information for Jackson City residents as they consider how they will cast their upcoming votes. The League wishes to also thank Ms. Gwen Tabb for accepting our invitation to be the moderator for this important candidate forum. We are also appreciative of those citizens who submitted questions for this candidate forum. We would also like to thank the Lean Rocket Lab of Jackson for the use of their space to produce this forum. We hope you will all share this candidate forum with your family and friends, and we encourage all Jackson citizens to vote in the November 2nd election.